Poor Joseph. What a nightmare, having to travel 90 miles from Nazareth to Bethlehem to take part in a Roman census with a young wife who is 8 months gone with her first pregnancy. Some men might have resented being in such a situation, might have asked, not unreasonably, why me? But, as you are by now aware, Joseph the carpenter isn't some men. The house and workshop are shuttered and locked, and Joseph settles Mary on the old donkey that has hitherto spent its weary life carrying the carpenter's tables and chairs to their new homes. You don't need to know much about Joseph and Mary's journey, the laborious daily slog along stony, dusty hill roads in stifling heat, the long, bitterly cold nights huddled by the roadside that pass with tedious slowness. Joseph gives up counting the days, needing no calendar other than Mary's changing condition. If they reach Bethlehem before the baby is born, they will be lucky. And they are. Although luck, of course, has nothing to do with it. Night is descending and Mary's contractions are beginning as they trudge into the small town. Every town is a mystery to outsiders, and on this night, Bethlehem is full to capacity with outsiders. Joseph's worst fears are confirmed. The influx of those responding to mighty Caesar's edict are all looking for accommodation, and not finding it. At inn after inn, they receive the same curt response that has since figured in hundreds of dramatic interpretations of this story. No room, no room. Then, beyond expectation, one innkeeper, perhaps on the insistence of his kind-hearted better half, takes pity on the distracted traveller with a wife on the point of childbirth. To be sure, there's no room in the inn, but if they have nowhere else to go, well, then there is, at least, a stable. Yes, we have now arrived at one of the most famous buildings, or to be precise, outbuildings in art and literature, the stable. But what can I possibly say of the place? In your own mind, you will have the perfect picture of exactly what it looked like, courtesy of Botticelli, Tintoretto, Caravaggio, Rubens, El Greco, or 1,000 others. It might be a rough-hewn cave or a rickety lean-to of wattle and thatch. I suggest, therefore, that just as you have always seen it in your mind's eye, is how you should see it now. You may keep the lowing oxen, the braying ass, the golden carpet of scattered straw illuminated by the light of a lantern hanging from a beam, but add in, if you will, what the painters, out of piety or propriety, have tended to omit: the dirt, the anxiety, the pain, the sweat and the messiness of birth. Add, too, the midwife who helps with the birth. What midwife, you ask? Well, there are several old stories where she appears, and, since I have already mentioned her, let's assume she is that compassionate wife of the innkeeper, taking precious time from her responsibilities as hostess to bring a little food and wine, a calming voice, a reassuring touch, and, most importantly, a bowl of hot water and some old, but clean, cloths with which to wash and wrap the newborn child. As the midwife bustles back to her usual duties, the little family is left alone. Mary, despite her youth, is a life force to be reckoned with. The birth has been no harder for her than for many other first-time mothers, but she has brought her child into the world far away from the security of home and family, and with only the faithful Joseph and a caring stranger to help. Now, despite the exhaustion of the journey and her labour, she is, like any new mother, totally absorbed in her baby. Joseph stands on the periphery of her experience, gazing with a mixture of wonderment and confusion at the child being rocked in Mary's arms. Every father looks to see some semblance of himself in his child, but not Joseph. There is no similarity to seek. He tries to feel how he imagines he ought to feel. But the more he does so, the more he is aware that this child both is and yet is not his son. He has played no part in making him, and yet this vulnerable little bundle is now his responsibility. If it was Mary's burden to bear this special child, then it is now his to learn to love it as if it were his own. But how does any father set about loving a son, whether his own or, as here, by adoption? Everyone understands a mother's love. It's a given. A father's love is harder to define, and at this moment, Joseph has no idea how to begin. Jesus, for so he is named, as preordained, has scarcely been cradled to sleep in the crude, straw-filled manger that has to substitute for Joseph's lovingly made crib left back in Nazareth, when a group of shepherds, plain and simple folk, come peeping into the scene. Awkward and hesitant, they talk in hushed astonishment of seeing an angel of the Lord. I'm sure I don't need to name him, accompanied by a heavenly host, bidding them to come to witness an event that, by its very ordinariness, is extraordinary. For Joseph, the arrival of these strangers is truly puzzling. Why would God choose to announce the miraculous birth of his son to a bunch of shepherds, rather than, say, the priests and religious officials? The obvious answer, which is the one Joseph sagely settles on, is that you have to start somewhere. If you want a more sophisticated explanation for the shepherd's role in this drama, then it could be that they are there to provide a proletarian witness, the common man allowed to view the uncommon wonder that has taken place. Just as a royal party, even now en route to this narrative, might be thought to represent the presence of the great and good, the wise and powerful. Yes, it's time now to talk about the three kings, or, as they are alternatively known, the three wise men. You have seen them so many times, in their robes, crowns, and turbans, that it will not change your view to be told that the number 3 is only a guess, based on the number of gifts, that they were not necessarily kings, that their names, as we now popularly know them, were never officially recorded, and that they didn't actually arrive that night at the stable, but came later, long after Mary, Joseph, and the child were living in rather more conventional accommodation. But rather than confuse what has been a perfectly successful story that has stood the test of time for centuries, we'll stick to the facts as they have been set down in legend. They come, these wise men, from the east with their camels, entourages, servants, and all the standard paraphernalia of authority figures. They are also sometimes referred to as magi. Magicians is probably not the best word, so let's say they are astrologers, although they are also, almost certainly, astronomers, since, in those times, astrologers and astronomers are pretty much one and the same. Men of stature and significance they may be, but they are certainly not followers of the God of Moses. Nevertheless, they have been summoned to make their journey by the rising of a new star in the eastern sky. There are those who have sought to explain this claim with speculations about comets and eclipses, but I prefer the more poetic explanation that the heavens themselves proclaimed the magnitude of this cosmic event. The challenge set these magi was to seek, find, and pay reverence to a child who, as the signs foretold, was born to kingship. And without doubt it has proved a hard task and has been a long and onerous pilgrimage through the worst bleak midwinter weather. However, as their quest nears its goal, these wise men, for all their wisdom, make a disastrous and near fatal error. They decide to consult the local monarch, King Herod, or as he prefers, Herod the Great, about the possible birthplace of the new sovereign of whom they've been told. If you are seeking the whereabouts of one king, ask the advice of another. Unfortunately, this particular king happens to be a paranoid psychopath. So when 3 wandering sages ask the Jewish-born Herod, "Where is the child born king of the Jews?" he is seriously rattled. What does it mean? Usurpation? Herod consults his own wise men, and from their extensive knowledge of ancient prophecy, they advise His Majesty that Bethlehem is the likely birthplace. The fearful Herod slyly instructs the travellers to pursue their mission, and if they find the child, to return with news so that, as he disingenuously claims, he too may go and pay homage. The unsuspecting magi head straight to Bethlehem, unaware that the consequence of their regrettable mistake will cost many lives. That is in the future. For the moment, here they are. 3 more outsiders arriving in the heavily congested town. For sake of continuity, then, let's return to that now somewhat overcrowded stable to witness their entrance. Out of courtesy to the old stories, I will use their traditional names. Caspar, the young man, lithe, virile, and clean-shaven, believed by some to be a king of India. Melchior, the old man, stooped and venerable, with long white hair and beard, often referred to as a king of Persia. And Balthazar, bearded and dark of skin, a king, it said, of Arabia. They kneel, or, in the case of Melchior, whose old knees no longer permit kneeling, bow before Mary and the baby, something so at odds with Joseph's understanding of custom and correctness that he steps back a pace in bafflement. Then the visitors open and offer gifts of astonishing value and disconcerting significance that Mary accepts with solemnity and apparent understanding, but which further trouble Joseph and make him feel even more an observer of another person's story. Caspar is first. His gift, enfolded in richly embroidered silk, is a jar carved from porphyry, plain and unadorned, but with a stopper of blue agate, which, when removed, releases the clean, sweet aroma of frankincense that transforms the stale, stable air with its bouquet of citrus and spice. Melchior is next. His gift, securely tied with leather straps, is a finely wrought casket of antique silver, studded with garnets as red as blood, and pearls the colour of a summer moon, and within a great quantity of gold gleaming with a heavy, burnished warmth in the lantern light. Then last, or first, the order is unimportant, Balthazar presents his gift, a purple velvet bag secured with golden tasselled cords, from which he takes a box of pale translucent alabaster incised with a complex design inlaid with lapis lazuli, the colour of a peacock's breast. When opened, a heady, overpowering perfume spills out into the air, redolent of new-turned earth, laced with resin. It is the bitter fragrance of myrrh. These offerings are not only heavy with weight and worth, but also with prefigurement, frankincense representing divinity and worship, gold for kingship and honour, and myrrh for death and burial. If Joseph has even a glimmer of comprehension about the meaning of these portents, it is overwhelmed by the prosaic question of how he will manage the journey back to Nazareth with wife, child, and such seriously cumbersome luggage. Before that, however, they have to travel a little over 5 miles to Jerusalem in order to fulfill the rituals of their faith. Only 5 miles, no distance really, but still, those gifts are burdensome.